Hey everyone, it's time to draw our lowercase c and then our lowercase e. For the letters C and E, we're going to open those two, as well as our lowercase u and our lowercase r, or even our f. First, we'll start with the C because it has most of the DNA we need for our lowercase e. I'm going to start by copying over my lowercase o, which you can imagine this coming from. With my o pasted in there, I can decide what terminals I want on my lowercase c. If I were drawing a grotesque lowercase c in a sans serif version, I might draw in a rectangle like this so that I can see how those terminals are going to work or where those are going to be levelly cut. On my paths here, I can then add points really quickly so that they're going to be about where they ought to be. Then I can delete that rectangle. And Glyphs does this funny thing where if you try to delete points, it tries to finish off that path for you. And we want to change this from two individual paths to one continuous path. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to hit Command X to cut it. Cutting those removes Glyphs' AI of trying to complete that path. And then we can go in, and with our pen tool, we can recomplete that path as it is. Again, if I were going to continue working in this way, I'd then bring these in a little bit, and then I would work to make sure my curves are working well and my terminals are doing exactly what they need to. For our typeface, because of the way we've designed it, we're going to have a terminal that's more like our lowercase r and lowercase f. So instead, I'm going to get rid of some of these things that I've done. I'm going to back all the way up, and I'm going to bring in our lowercase r, at least the top here, and I've changed some of this since we've worked on it together. Once I get this in here, I'm going to start to rotate him a little bit, ever so slightly. I'm going to set it just 2 degrees so I can turn him up until he looks like he's going to be in a place that I like. I probably could have done a larger integer there so that I could not have to click so many times. But I'm going to spin this until I like where that terminal is going to end. That feels pretty good. And then I can play with just a straight line here with my pen tool to think about where I might want the terminal out here to be. When I'm looking at this C, if I like where that overhang is going to terminate, then I can think about getting that lower bit to end at a similar point. With our typeface that has a high contrast, our bottom stroke down here will end on a thin, and our top stroke there will have that thick where that sort of teardrop terminal is, and then we'll narrow out at the top there. So we'll start by adding the points to this path the same way we just did. So we'll add a point here and here. And then I know my curve is going to come around, and I'll have a flat point at the bottom, and then one probably somewhere over here, and we'll add one more just for overcompensation's sake. Then I can select these 2 points that sort of bridge those gaps and Command X to cut those out. Then again with my pen tool, I can connect these points down here and connect these up here. And I'm going to just include these handles here so I don't have to bring them out later. Then I'll delete that bottom line down there. We'll come back to them in a minute. And with these points up here, I'm going to start to try to match the tone of my terminal there. Now, I know that my correct paths have straight points here, so I might say I need that, and maybe I don't actually need this point over here, or maybe that's from my lowercase r. So I might just get rid of him really quickly. I'm going to take this part of the C and I'm going to make sure it's straight up and down and not on some crazy curve. And now I'm going to try to make sure it's as thick as that lowercase r, and this might get confusing in here, so I can go ahead and delete that. And we can start to see how that top of that C is going to match our F and our R. So we're paying attention to all 3 of these characters, making sure that terminal is in the same sort of family. Similar to when we initially cut this, we're going to bring these in because we want to tuck in those ends a little bit. I could do the same thing over here And for this one, I'll just bring that bottom lip in. So we start to work through this character. And now it's just a matter of making sure our curves are right. So we'll push some of this here. We'll manipulate some of these points to get this to be the right proportions for us. We want that teardrop to be nice and smooth. We want to look like it belongs to that F and to that R. And looking at all three of those, it's not looking too bad. The last bit is just going to be that terminal here. Time for a quick break in the content to ask if you're enjoying what you're watching and seeing, to please subscribe to the channel, because that's the best way to support what's going on in this channel. If you're already subscribed, be sure to like the video, comment on it, and share it with somebody new. All right, back to the action. In this typeface, I think it might be easier to look at this in comparison to some other serifs. So in the F and in the R and all our other characters, we're trying to match things to that serif. And in our lowercase c and e, we want that outstroke terminal to have the same tonality as our serif. So looking at it here, one, that outstroke is too far into the left compared to that teardrop. And two, it's not quite pointy enough. When we look at those serifs, they're a little bit sharper than what this is doing. So we might bring those out a little bit. I'll bring these points out. And now I'm starting to look at the bottom preview as well. And I'll tuck him in just a little bit. I can also start to adjust these so it feels like a smooth curve, and he needs a little bit of help through here. So we'll make sure that he gets all the help and attention he needs. And that's starting to feel a little better. I might tuck this in just a little bit more. And we'll work through something like that. As with all our other characters, it's not quite perfect, but you can understand how we're going to work through this letter C so that we have the top part that matches that F and that R, the bottom outstroke that coincides with our serifs, and the curve that sort of matches that O. Again, we have all the DNA here that we need. Finally, I'll copy it back onto that sans serif version. For us, they're about the same. There's no serifs that get added in this serif versus sans serif version. And we'll go from there. Next, we'll work on our lowercase e. We have a lot of good data that we need from it, from this bottom C here. So I'm going to copy just those bottom points and paste it into that E. Then we also have some good DNA from the top part of our O over here. So I'm going to grab those points, copy, and paste it into my E over here. Glyphs is really smart, and it pastes it right where we copied it from. And if we bring these points in and touch them together, it joins them automatically. So we already have a shape that's working for us. For our lowercase e, similar to our lowercase c, this is just a little bit narrower. So we want to bring that in just a little bit. And then we can go and grab something like the crossbar of our F and paste it in here for one final element that will bring us to all the components we need for our lowercase e. Now, we're going to finish off, and we're going to touch this together so he's one piece. And keeping this crossbar separate from the rest of this letter form helps us later on when we're drawing different weights of a font. When we're looking at this, you can see how much wider that E is than that understroke there. We can remedy that by making this a little bit narrower, bringing them in. We'll bring these points over just a little bit, and we'll start to get this character to match what we want to do proportionally. Now, when we're putting in the crossbar of our E, we really get to decide how we're balancing this white space, and also getting to balance it in future characters. The lowercase e and the lowercase a are really heavily related, and so we get to work with those two together. In this instance, I'm going to leave that crossbar fairly near the center. I could bring it up if I wanted to have a larger aperture. That's that opening between that top bar and that terminal there. The aperture of our C is fairly open, so that might match it. I could also bring it quite far down and have a slow, closed-off aperture. In either case, those are setting the tone of what your typeface is going to look like and how it's going to read. So it can be helpful to play with it and keep this as individual components so that If you want to go back and change it later, you can. For now, I'm just going to finish off this by hiding that little point there. Some typefaces will have a higher opening or a larger aperture. We could add a point here, for example, and then bring these points up, and that sort of gives us a little bit of an opening there. We could, if we wanted to, angle this so it's on a little bit of a slant, which could be nice if we match the slant of our serif. For now, though, I think we'll keep it level so it's easy for us to continue and work through this as a letter form. I'm going to tuck him in just a little bit more and make sure my curve is still looking good. I want my axis to be straight up and down. And then finally, I may have to pull this out just a little bit more because that overshoot goes a little bit higher. That top half goes a little bit higher than our lowercase c. Remember, in our lowercase c, we have these that are right above each other. We want to make sure that our E feels similar. So we'll bring this out just to make sure he is in a decent spot. We'll manipulate these handles to make sure we have a good curve. And then we'll try to get these two to belong to one another. I may have adjusted it too far, so we'll bring it back. Thus is the type design process. And that feels pretty good. Again, our E and our C are the same in serif and sans serif. They don't have any additional features. So we'll paste that in there. And then finally, we'll make sure that our side bearings are all set to the same thing that our O is. Our O is going to set the tone for these because they're the same as curved letters. So we want to make sure that our side bearings are all the same. And we have our C and our E. Thanks again for liking the video. As always, please make sure you're subscribed and that you like the video so we can keep pushing these forward. If you've already done that, share them, comment on them, just spread the design love everywhere.